Hi Kenneth, here is some feedback on your Unit 3 assignment. The first thing that I just want to point out to you, and I made a note about that in the Dropbox as well, is that sometimes when you try to type math, it doesn't always sort of line up where it needs to, and it's sometimes more difficult for us to read the solutions that you have written than if you just wrote it by hand. Most of my students now are just doing that and then taking a picture with their cell phone and then loading that picture as a JPEG to the Dropbox. If you can do that, it would be much easier. It will save you a lot of time. It will also make it a lot easier for me to mark your work, okay? So question 3A was correct. Question 3B, I just want to point out a mistake that you're making, and when you're doing cosine law, trying to find an unknown side, you seem to be making this mistake each time. What you have to remember is, we call it BEDMAS here, you might call it PEMDAS. I've seen it done both ways. What that is a reminder of the order of operations that you have to do when you have an equation that has a lot of different things in it. So when we use BEDMAS, the B stands for brackets, so you do brackets first in an equation, and then the E for exponents, D and M for divide and multiply, and you just do those in the order that you see them in the question, and A and S for add and subtract, and again you just do those in the order that they come up in the equation. So we're breaking the rules of BEDMAS, or the order of operations, when you're doing your cosine law, because what you're doing is taking these two numbers and adding them, or subtracting them in this case, before you're multiplying here. The multiplying must come before the subtracting or adding. So if you multiply 754 times the cos of 41 degrees, you get 569, and so 841 plus 169 is 1010, minus 569 is going to give you an answer of c squared equals 441. Now when you take the square root, you'll get the right answer for C. So I've just made a note here just to let you know I use a couple of different programs, such as one on my iPad that I'm using right now. And I know that your original work doesn't look like this. I've got it in front of me on my big computer while I'm marking this, so I can clearly see what you've got. But you can see how if you had just done it as a JPEG, it would be much easier because it won't transform these numbers to different places and make it so sort of jumbled, okay? So let's try that on the next one, please. So I'm just going to scroll down here, and now we're on question 5. And the same thing happened on question 5 as up above. If you have multiplying in your equation, you must do that multiplying first, and then you can do the adding and subtracting parts of the equation. If you do this in the correct order of operations, you should get 37,369 for p squared, and taking the square root of that leaves you with a value of 193.3. The other thing that you want to consider is that the smallest side is always opposite the smallest angle, and the biggest side is always opposite the biggest angle in a triangle. And so sometimes if we ask ourselves at the end of the question whether or not that rule seems to hold, it's a good way of catching an error that you might have made. In this case, you don't have the value of angle R, so it's hard to compare. But 65 seems like a very small distance from R to Q compared to the other distances that we were given. It's only 1/3 of 180, for instance. And so if that seems like it might be out of line with the scale or the values that you're given for the other sides, it's usually a good idea to check and make sure that you haven't made a mistake somewhere. Okay? Here's question 6, and question 6 is just fine. You can see again that things have gotten a little messed up when it translates into my iPad. And so again, if we handwrite our solutions and just take a picture, that's going to solve that problem, okay? So if you could just go back and please go over some of those cosine law questions where you're finding the unknown side. Make sure that you're doing the operations correctly in the correct order, and that should clean up that problem, okay, as you move forward. Thanks, Kenny.